going to be doing a presentation on search engine optimization. And Kevin is IDRC's web and digital media specialist and a member of the Center's communications department. He's a biologist by training, but began his communications career in the 1980s producing educational media for the school board. And after a stint as the director of communications for a Canadian NGO, he launched a successful freelance writing career. And his clients have included the Canadian International Development Agency and the International Development Research Center. But in 1996, IDRC made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. And he spent the next 12 years as a writer and editor before taking over responsibilities for the public website. Kevin would not describe himself as a digital native, but as an immigrant to the cyber world who has worked hard to understand the language and culture of the Internet. So he's going to give us a presentation for about half an hour, and then we can have a short question and answer period. Or because it's just you, Kamal, if you'd like to jump in anytime and ask a question or make a comment, feel free to do that.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll pass it over to Kevin now and look forward to hearing the presentation. Over to you, Kevin.
Great stuff. Thank you, Katie. So first thing I'm going to do is share my desktop. So over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be talking to you about SEO, or search engine optimization. And here's what I'm going to be telling you about. I'll be telling you a bit about what it is, why it's important, and how we can improve it. But before I plunge into SEO, I really want to set the stage by sharing with you 3 insights that I think I have come to garner my years of working on the web and the websites. But don't worry about remembering any of them, because I'm going to refer to them several times throughout the webinar here. And here's what I want you to remember. First thing is that the web is a task-based medium. So visitors to your website or any website rarely arrive there by accident. And they almost always arrive with a purpose in mind. And I think about our own website, for example. People come to IDRC first and foremost looking for funding. So the second thing that I want you to remember is that good websites focus on users, not themselves. And this really kind of flows from my first point. If people arrive at your website with a task in mind, for example, looking for a policy brief, then your job is to make sure that they find that policy brief easily. So in other words, the architecture and navigation elements of your website must aid in quick and easy retrieval of content. I know that seems kind of self-evident, but just think of how many websites out there really want to tell you about themselves rather than helping you complete your task. And frequently, I find anyways, that their efforts to market themselves get in the way of my finding what I came looking for. Now, I know that one of the issues people often have is trying to figure out what tasks users to their website are trying to complete. But I think that Caitlin Miles' webinar last week on Google Analytics was a good overview of a tool that can really help you with that kind of discovery, to really learn why people are coming to your website and what they're trying to do. So that brings me to my third point, and that is this. Content does not improve with volume. The internet has made publishing content to a global audience an absolute breeze, but it has done very, very little to ensure its quality. And we still see today content that was obviously written for print and then dumped onto a website. This is wrong, and it turns website users off. Your website users will judge you by the quality of your content, and you should make that the hallmark of your website. If you do, you'll see traffic to your website increase. And here's the little secret. Good quality content is also good search engine optimization practice. Okay, so now let's have a look at SEO. So what is SEO? In a nutshell, SEO is about making your content findable. Remember I said that quality must be the hallmark of your website. Well, I got to tell you, good quality takes time and effort to create. But having taken all that time, you want to make sure that people who should be looking for your content can find it. So SEO is important because it can help make your content more findable. But it's also important for a couple of other reasons that I'm going to explain now. To find content, most people begin with a search engine. And in the world of search engines, this one is the granddaddy. Indeed, Google is so popular and ubiquitous that we've made it a verb. If you're looking for something, what do? You just Google it. But the real significance of our desire to just Google it is this. Search is now the main resource discovery strategy for most people. I'm going to repeat that. Search is now the main resource discovery strategy for most people. So when it comes to completing a task or looking for content, then most people begin by plugging a keyword into a search box like the one you see here. So on the IDRC website, for example, numbers that we have pulled from Google Analytics show that of the 150,000 or so visitors we had to our website in the period of May 1 to June 1, fully 66% or 2/3 of the traffic arrived via a search engine, and Google alone accounted for 9/10 of that traffic. So the importance of search engines, and Google in particular, to finding the content on our website is immense. But the other point I want to make about the importance of SEO can be seen here. After the search term has been entered and Google returns the results, numbers show that less than 2% of Google users will go past the first page of results when looking for content that responds to their query. Only 1 in 50 will scroll to the bottom of this page to look at the next one. So if you're not on that first page of results, chances of people finding all that great content you worked so hard to create diminishes very rapidly. So your goal as a creator of quality content that you want found is to place as high in search rankings as possible. And that is what optimizing your content for search engines can help you with. But before I show you how to maximize your chances of discovery by a search engine, I have a couple of caveats or warnings I'd like to share. So SEO, or search engine optimization, is a bit of a black art. And the reason I describe it as a black art is because of the way search engines describe what content is most relevant to the keyword or phrase that a user types into a search box. The real thing to note here is that not all content or content creators are treated equally. Search engines like Google rely on algorithms, complex formulas, that look at much more than just how well your content matches a particular keyword or phrase. Their algorithms look at things like links to your site, how many and from whom, the freshness of your content, do you update it regularly, traffic. Numbers are usually a good indicator of popularity when it comes to websites. Server speed. Now this isn't an obvious one, but if you're making sure that your website serves up content fast, it says to the world that you care about your visitors' time. And the one that's becoming more and more important is social media mentions. The more often your content is mentioned in social media is usually a good sign the quality of your content is there also. So there's this constant cat and mouse struggle that goes on between people looking to game the system and search engine companies. Now most of us don't have the time or money to play this game. Slow and steady always wins the race. So many of the elements that go into search engine algorithms are beyond our control. I can't do too much about the number of social media mentions that I get, for example. But by paying attention to those factors that we do control, and by keeping the quality of our content high, we will get a more reputable site linking to us, traffic will increase, and we will improve our ranking in search engines. So, let's get on to how to look at how to improve our rankings in search engines. So we're going to look at some of the factors that we do control when it comes to optimizing our content for search engines. And we're going to begin by asking ourselves a question. And it's this: what keywords would users use to search for our content? We could also ask, rephrase that question as, what tasks will visitors to our website want to complete? As think tanks, the people you probably want finding your content would include researchers maybe, policy and other decision makers, government officials, and donors. You want to think about how these users view the world. Many of them, I'm sure, are subject matter specialists. Others have a particular geographic focus, and others still may be interested in particular development issues. So their background often informs the kind of keywords they use when searching. So those are the keywords that should find your way into your content, but perhaps not quite in the way that you might have thought. And I'll show you what I mean with an example that I've pulled from IDRC's old website. So what you're looking at here is an article that was part of a series IDRC produced as a tribute to its 40 years of supporting research for development. And as you can see, the article explores the role of Moroccan cooperatives in improving women's economic outlook. I'm going to use this article to show you how my search results change based on the term or phrase I entered into the Google search box. And we're going to begin with this phrase: cooperative for women. So I plug this into the search box. The Google algorithm turns away, comparing the phrase I've entered here with the relevant content across the web. And after what I think is an amazingly short time, given all the websites out there, it returns these results. So when the term cooperatives for women is entered into the Google search box, the article appears as number 9. Not bad. But let's see if we can't do better with something, a phrase that's a little bit more specific. So this time I type in improving women's lives through cooperatives. And again, Google turns away in the background and it returns these results. Now this is looking better. The article ranks number 2 in the results list. So the chances of a reader finding and, more importantly, reading this article has improved immensely in that jump from 9th place to 2nd. So why the difference? The answer, it turns out, has everything to do with where Google looks, or search engines look, when trying to match my search term. So let's return to our example here and see. So cooperatives and women, for example, turns out that you see those terms right here in what we call a subhead. It's a secondary title, really. Whereas improving women's lives appears in the title of the page, and in this case, in the right-hand menu of the navigation. So what this tells us is that the placement of keywords and the content you write is important to search engine ranking. In fact, titles are the #1 place for putting keywords and phrases. So what I show you here then is the relative placement of keywords and their effect on search relevancy. So as you can see, page titles rank #1, headlines and subheads number 2 and 3, keywords used in the first paragraph, number 4, captions on multimedia, and that is usually images associated with content, number 5, alt tags on multimedia, and I'll come back to alt tags in just a minute to explain that a little more fully, and then finally, body content. But we can improve on this further by following certain tips when it comes to how to use keywords in our content. And here are those tips. So when you're writing your content, you should think about using synonyms. In the example I used here on improving women's lives, we can see the word cooperative is used at several places in the article. it has at least 2 different spellings, plus they're frequently referred to by the shortened term co-ops. And also in the course of your writing, if you make reference to a geographic area, see if you can't expand that reference elsewhere. In our example, for example, the writer mentioned Morocco. They could easily expand the geographic frame of reference by beginning a sentence with, in this region of North Africa. So there they've expanded the geographic reference from beyond the country of Morocco to the whole area of North Africa. Excuse me. Now, while our example speaks broadly of economic development, the piece is far more specific in the way it treats the theme by talking about improving women's lives. But it's my 4th point here, I think, that's probably the most important. Don't overdo it. Remember, and I'm going to harp on this, we want to be known for the quality of our content. Using synonyms, expanding on the geographical references and themes should be part of the natural flow of your text and not forced. If it seems forced, look for other opportunities to use these tips. For example, if you're using an image, you can add a caption. So in the example that I have here in front of us, we could easily add a caption that reads something like this: across North Africa, co-ops are providing women opportunities to improve their livelihoods. So we not only have we expanded the geographical reference, we've used a synonym, and we've got beyond that notion of improving women's lives to livelihoods. So paying attention to your use of keywords and titles and headlines, captions and subheadings are visible changes that will make your content more search engine friendly. But in looking at SEO, we also need to concern ourselves with invisible content. And that's what I'm going to turn my attention to now. So when I talk about invisible content, I'm really referring to something called metadata tags. So metadata are attributes that are usually attached to a piece of content or an object on a website, like a picture, for example. And if you've used Windows Explorer, then you're already probably pretty used to seeing metadata. I'm sure that this view of the document folder looks pretty familiar to many people. In the left-hand row, we see the file name followed by 3 columns of attributes. When the file was last modified, the type of file, in this case JPEG images, and the size of each file. These are all metadata. Now let's look at our example of metadata in our piece about improving women's lives. The metadata that we're going to be looking at here is called alternative or alt text. And you sometimes see alt text when you're on a web page and you mouse over an image and the little box with the descriptive text pops up. But you can also see it when you turn off images when browsing, and here's what that might look like. So when you turn off the images, what you see is text that's actually hidden from view behind the image. And in this case, I've added the alt text women, part of a co-op in North Africa, or sorry, woman, part of a co-op in North Africa, tends to her stall in the market. And you see what I've done here again? I have expanded my use of synonyms. I've expanded the geographic reference, and the notion of economy or livelihoods has now been changed, is now captured in the use of the word market. Okay. But alt text is important also for 2 other reasons. Search engines use alt text to give an image meaning. In other words, this is important to how a search engine ranks your content. And if you don't have alt text there, you're missing an important opportunity for a search engine to discover that content and use it when it's deciding how relevant your content is to the search term a user has entered into the search engine. But the other reason that's of growing importance is that accessibility rules require it for screen readers used by the visually impaired. The World Wide Web Consortium, which is a international body that oversees the development of many of the standards across the web now, is really pushing hard to see that accessibility rules are adopted, and more we have to pay attention to the fact that there are people out there using the web for whom sighted options aren't quite as apparent as it is to those of us for whom sight isn't an issue. So alt text allows them to use a screen reader and let them find that information that's hidden behind an image. Okay, here's another opportunity to improve the findability of our content that might not be immediately apparent. So what we're looking at here is the HTML tag associated with the image in our example. HTML, or hypertext markup language, is a series of coded instructions that helps your browser, and it tells your browser, how to display content, in this case an image. So I've highlighted the important piece of metadata here. It's the image file name. As you can see, because of the way it's constructed, it's all but meaningless to a search engine. There are no actual real words in there that it can discern because the words are jumbled together with numbers. But we can make a relatively simple name change, and the file becomes much more useful and much more findable. So what we've done here then is we've changed the file name, and we've actually used the title of the article as part of the image file name. But I want to point out something else that we've done, is we've added these little hyphens in between these words. And we do that because if this were used in part of a URL or returned as part of a search, wherever there is a space, search engines replace that space with the 20% symbol. So this prevents that from happening. Okay. So let's see how we can put this all together to improve the findability of our lasting impacts article by raising its ranking for keyword searches in Google. So let's begin with our question: how will users find this content? Let's think about some of the synonyms that we might use. And you can see here the spellings for cooperatives plus 2 of its shortened forms. So we look for opportunities within our text to use these synonyms. We can expand on the geography too, as I've mentioned several times now, by moving from beyond the specific country, Morocco, to the larger region of North Africa. And when it comes to themes, we can talk about improving women's lives, but within a context of rural livelihoods. Including these keywords broadens the base of search terms that a user can type into a search engine to find our content. But we can also use these keywords in other places. For example, we can use it as part of the metadata in the image, as part of the alt text, as part of keywords of the file name and the title. We can use it in a photo caption. Photo captions are great places not just to include other keywords, but to really add an important message around the content that you've developed. Photo captions, if you ever look at how people look at web pages or print documents for the most part, you'll see that people's eyes generally track to images very quickly. They're attractive. Adding a key piece of content that reinforces your message in the form of a caption is just real good communication practices. And, as it turns out, it's also a great SEO practice. And here's another opportunity for us to use those keywords. In subhead, you'll see the subhead here says blending old and new technologies. If we had thought about how we might want to use some of the keywords that we looked at, we could add them here to the subheads. And as you saw in that list that I provided of how search engines rank where the position of keyword subheads, I believe, are somewhere around number 4. So this is an excellent opportunity that we've missed in this particular piece by not including some of the subheads that we know would be important to finding this piece of content out there in the web. Okay, so in closing, I want to remind you of a couple of things. Remember that SEO is a bit of a black art, and that slow and steady always wins the race when it comes to maximizing the search engine opportunities for your content. So I mentioned near the beginning of my talk that creating quality content takes time. So if you've invested your labor into creating great content, you want to make sure that it is findable by search engines. I think we should all begin thinking of our readers as people searching for a needle in an internet haystack. Our job is to make that needle as big as possible. And that is what optimizing your content for search engines does. Thanks. That brings us to the end of my presentation.
Great.
But I'm open to any questions that anybody out there may have.
Hello?
Kamal, do you have a question?
Not actually, but yeah, I would say that I was much more interested with the alternative text use and the what do you call it, black art kind of idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I found that using the alt text was really interesting because when you were talking about synonyms, I was thinking if I saw cooperative spelled differently on a single page, I would think it looked a little bit sloppy. I would, I wouldn't want to have cooperative without the hyphen and then cooperative with the hyphen, but alt text allows you to put in all of those different kinds of spellings and whatever to get more people coming to your website. And it's really
Certainly because now.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's
No, it's okay. No, certainly because now, even in a research organization, most of the researchers want to have different spellings in their text.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very good idea that we can use it in the alternative text as maybe as a research photo caption or something like that.
That's an excellent point. So the idea here is that your use of synonyms should not break sort of standard rules of good writing, and you're entirely right, having cooperative spelled two different ways in a text would be considered sloppy. So knowing that there's these hidden elements that you can use in file names, in alt text, is a great way for slipping those in without actually damaging, if I can use that term, your content.
Yeah. It also really highlights the importance of researchers working very closely with the people who are actually putting the content on the website, and having the researchers say what the alt text should be and what's really important and what the headline should be, because a lot of the time I think researchers sort of would write the body of the content, but actually that comes sort of far down the list of what Google is actually looking at to bring up the search results. So it's really important to have that strong sense of working together.
And as I know I've gone on and on about this, but it really is the quality of your content that will make or break your web presence. And that notion of collaboration there, making sure that you have the technical elements, particularly for a research institution, down well, but then that you have some of the skills that a writer or communicator may have, adding to that to enhance it is an important element in producing good content. So you're right, collaborative efforts work very well.
Mm-hmm.
I do have one question, please.
Yeah.
Now, with regard to the PDF documents, is that what you call Google is skillful to go through all these PDFs, because as a research organization we may come up with a lot of research papers in PDF.
Right.
So then whether the Google is able to go through those PDFs and get the text up.
Good question. I'm not entirely sure if Google indexes an entire PDF. I doubt that it does. What it might do is look at the title, but remember when you're posting a PDF to a website, you still have to give that PDF a file name. And that's where you can make a real difference. So make sure that the file name that you use for your PDF is something understandable. Quite frankly, the file name should probably be, or be a derivative of, the title of the PDF.
All right.
So, but I would say that the same rules that applied to creating a web page would apply to building a PDF. So make sure that you use the proper keywords in some of the key places and titles and subheads, that you break the text up into chunks using keyword subheads or subheadings to separate the content into easily digestible bite-sized chunks. One of the things that the web is doing to us is it's changing the way we read and consume content. Not necessarily content for pleasure, but content that we tend to read in our day-to-day work lives. We tend now to want to consume content in mouthfuls. You don't want to sit down and look at a 300-word or 300-page sheet all in one long paragraph. So design and layout elements where you break that content up with images, with text boxes, all those elements that allow a user to scan the content and get some notion of what's in there before they decide whether or not they're going to invest their time and effort into really digging into the content. So, but when it comes specifically to making it search engine friendly, PDFs, make sure you get the file name right and the title of the PDF.
All right.
I have a question for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
When you're talking about all of these different things that makes good search engine optimization, and all of that comes from good quality, and Google looking at the links to the site and how fresh the content is, social media, the traffic, and they're looking at the keywords and the titles, the headlines, down to the body content, and you have to think about what kinds of words your audience members will be coming from, whether it's donors, policymakers, other researchers, all the while really focusing on the good quality content. It seems like there's a lot going on, a lot you have to think about. So if think tanks are sort of starting to just think about this from scratch, they might be overwhelmed by all of the things that they're supposed to be doing in an ideal world. So if you could sort of pick on a few things or a couple of things that to start with, what do you think those would be?
So first and foremost, I'd say make sure that the quality of your content is top-notch. I think that will always be the key factor in determining whether or not people will come back to your website. So you
that's
could
sort of like the body of the body content of the pages.
So top-notch quality means that you have headlines.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'd say if you were going to concentrate on anything, I'd say get your titles and your subheadings right. So learn how to break up content into, as I mentioned earlier, manageable chunks, and use titles and headings that are relevant to your readers. So if you did those two elements alone, you'd go a long way towards making sure that the quality of your content responds to your users' needs. The other thing that I think that people sometimes really fail to appreciate about the web is that you are judged by the company you keep. So, what do I mean by that? I mean that when Google runs that algorithm, one of the things that they're looking at is who is linking to your website. So in the world of development, for example, you'll get more bang for your buck if you have somebody like the World Development Bank linking to your website than you would from some, say Health Canada.
Your personal blog.
Yeah, your personal blog. Exactly. So you can look for opportunities to elicit their response. So I know, for example, that there are a number of development gateways out there and publications that are looking for content across the web that have to do with development issues. By bringing some of that material to their attention, not only do you, if they pick it up, not only do you get your content distributed more widely, but it's distributed by an organization that's viewed as a credible source on the web. And that goes a long way towards boosting your reputation and kicking you up those search engine rankings. So it really is part of a marketing strategy, I guess, then that should go into trying to get the research that you're doing within your think tank more broadly viewed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anything else from you, Kamal?
Not so.
Kamal, I have a question for you.
Yeah, please.
Actually, two questions. Where are you calling from, and what's your position within the organization that you work for?
I'm calling from Colombo, Center for Quality Analysis, and I'm the online communications professional of the organization.
Oh, great.
And,
a fellow webhead.
And actually, I slightly found of some relationship similarity with us. I said that you are a biologist in origin.
Yes.
Same here. Yeah. I studied in natural sciences and then slowly converted into social sciences and especially the communication field. So that's what we are doing, the revamping of our site these days.
Okay.
And we are going to come up with a kind of a big portal, or the portal, with relation to the site.
Uh-huh.
So that's why I'm a bit interested in this conversation actually.
Great. Well, if at any point in the future, you want a little feedback, by all means, feel free to contact me. I'd be glad to offer my opinion or help you out in any way that I can.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay, well, I think that takes us to the end. Thank you very much, Kevin. That was really excellent. And thank you, Kamal, for joining. And we'll be putting this up, I believe, on our website at some point. We're still trying to figure out the best way to actually do that. Titling it correctly and putting all the links behind it. So thank you very much again, and we'll talk to you next time.
Okay, take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.